going to explain, I'm going to talk about fractional reserve banking and credit creation. To understand this fractional reserve banking and credit creation, I will use a practical example which is useful even in your examination. Assume that a customer deposits 10,000 rupees in Sampath Bank. 10,000 rupees in Sampath Bank. So Sampath Bank receives this money, receives this cash. It becomes the reserves of the bank and it's an asset of the bank. So it is because it is within the bank. And then Sampath Bank has a liability to pay this money back to the customer when he wants to withdraw it. So the bank has a liability as well. So this will be shown in the balance sheet of the bank as under assets, reserves 10,000, that represents the currency, cash, this money, and the liability, deposits 10,000. The Sampath Bank has to pay it back to the customer when he wants to withdraw it. Then, if the statutory reserve ratio is 10%, what is the maximum amount of loans this bank can grant? If the statutory reserve ratio is 10%, what is the maximum amount of loans bank can grant? Statutory reserve ratio. It's a legal requirement. Statutory reserve ratio is the percentage of deposits, percentage of this deposit, which the bank has to keep for withdrawal requirement of the customer. The bank doesn't have to keep the entire money, right? Because of the bank in practice, they know that the customers will not come and withdraw all the money at a given time, right? However, the central bank has given a condition or law, right? What is that? That is statutory reserve. Statutory means legal requirement. Right? Central bank has imposed this legal requirement. That is called statutory reserve. So what is statutory reserve ratio? A percentage of the deposit which a bank has to keep out of their reserves, right, for withdrawal requirement of the customers, either in the bank or the central bank. Right? The most important thing, it's a percentage of the deposits. It's not a percentage of the reserves. It's a percentage of the deposits. Right. So we can understand this creation. Now you know the bank has an actual reserve of 10,000. 10,000 actual reserve. And the bank has a liability, deposits of 10,000 as well. So out of that 10,000, SRR is 10%. So 10% of 10,000 means 1,000. That is the required reserve. Right? The bank has to keep this required reserve for the withdrawal purpose of the customers. Then what is the excess reserve? Excess reserve is 9,000. 10,000 minus 1,000. Actual reserve minus required reserve. That is the equation for excess reserve. Excess reserve equals actual reserve minus required reserve. This is a legal requirement for the withdrawal purpose of the customers. Right? Okay. So then this excess, what will the bank do with this excess reserve? What will the bank do with this excess reserve? It will lend money, grant loans. And this is the maximum amount of loans this bank can directly grant. It can't go beyond that because this is the legal requirement. Only 9,000 can be granted. So we say maximum amount of loans the bank can directly grant unless something else happens. Right? So now, yes. So therefore, out of this 10,000, required reserve is 1,000. So the excess reserve is 9,000, right? So that will be lent out as loans, right? And according to the fractional reserve banking, these loans are granted not by giving the reserve, not by giving cash, right? But by creating a deposit. creating a deposit and issuing a checkbook. A commercial bank can do that, right? So a commercial bank will grant these loans by creating deposits and issuing a checkbook, which is also money. This deposit represents money, right? Okay, so what happens is assets of the bank increase by 9,000, then liabilities, which is the deposit, which the customers can engage in transactions, increase by 9,000, right? Sampath Bank balance sheets has expanded, right? Okay, then the borrowers. Then we have to assume the borrowers purchase goods by writing checks, and those suppliers deposit them in Ceylon Bank. Another bank in the banking system. Those borrowers of 9,000 loan, they engage in transactions by writing checks, right? So now we assume the suppliers of those goods deposit those checks in Ceylon Bank, right? So what will happen? Whenever those customers write checks, the deposit this value, this created deposit 9,000, this will decrease, right? Once all the checkbooks are over, this deposit will be zero. And according to our example, it will go to another bank. It will go to Ceylon Bank, right? So what will happen? This deposit will decrease by 9,000, and when those suppliers deposit those checks in Ceylon Bank, Ceylon Bank's deposit will Ceylon Bank deposits will increase by 9,000, right? When the customers write checks, this created deposits will disappear, and when those suppliers deposit them in Ceylon Bank, deposits in Ceylon Bank will increase. And then through the check clearance, by producing these checks, by presenting these checks to Sampath Bank, Ceylon Bank will acquire the reserve, acquire this much of reserve. Out of this 10,000 reserves, Ceylon Bank will acquire 9,000. So what is left? What is left with Sampath Bank will be the 1,000. What is left with Sampath Bank will be, wait a second, yes. What is left with Sampath Bank will be 1,000, correct. Right. Okay. And that reserve will come to Ceylon Bank. Now you can see the balance sheet of Sampath Bank, right? Deposits 10,000, reserves 1,000, right? Can Sampath Bank grant any more loans? No, Sampath Bank cannot grant any more loans. Why is that? Because this 1,000 is the required reserve, which is 10% of deposits. It's a legal requirement. The bank has to keep it, right? 10% of 10,000. So this Sampath Bank cannot grant any more loans. But Ceylon Bank can grant loans, because Ceylon Bank has reserves of 9,000 and the deposits of 9,000. Ceylon Bank has to keep 10% of 9,000, which is 900, right? That's the required reserve, right? Out of this 9,000 reserves, Ceylon Bank has to keep only 10% of deposits, which is 900. So the required reserve is 900, and the actual reserve is 9,000. So what is the excess reserve? This is the way we calculate that. Actual reserve minus required reserve. Now the actual reserve is 9,000. Required reserve is 900. Excess reserve is, right, 8,100. In the next case, this is the first case now. So that's the maximum amount of loans Ceylon Bank can grant, 8,100. So Ceylon Bank will lend that. Ceylon Bank will lend that money by creating deposits, right? Okay. So yeah, if SRR is 10%, what is the maximum amount of loans Ceylon Bank can grant? Okay, what is that? That is 8,100, as I said, right? And these loans will also be granted by creating deposits. So loans increase by 8,100, deposits increase by 8,100. People can, by writing checks, engage in transactions with this money. So this is money supply, created deposit. This is money supply. So money supply has expanded. Money has been created. right? Okay, then again, these borrowers now, 8,100, right? Engage in transactions by writing checks. And we assume here the suppliers deposit them HNB at a national bank, right? Then what will happen? Then whenever these borrowers write these checks, this deposit will decrease, right? And when the suppliers deposit them HNB deposits will increase by, actually it has to be, this is the balance sheet of Ceylon Bank now. This is the balance sheet of Ceylon Bank. We have to observe the balance sheet of HNB. So what will happen in the balance sheet of HNB? That deposit 8,000 will come to HNB, right? And then the balance sheet of some Ceylon Bank will be, now this 8,000 will be reduced. It will disappear whenever those customers write checks, and it will go to HNB, right? It will go to HNB, right? Then HNB deposits will increase by 8,100. Then what will Hatton National Bank do? Now Hatton National Bank has checks of Ceylon Bank. Through the check clearance, Hatton National Bank will present those checks to Ceylon Bank and I will acquire this reserve. Will acquire this reserve of 8,100, out of this reserve 9,000. So what is left with Ceylon Bank is then 900. 8,100 reserves will go to Hatton National Bank. So Hatton National Bank will have now reserves of 8,100 and deposits of 8,100. Then what will Hatton National Bank do? Hatton National Bank will also do the same thing. SRR is 10%. Keep that 10% for the withdrawal requirements and the remainder, which is the excess reserve. Excess reserve, you can see that, right? Actual reserve is now 8,100. Required reserve is 8,810. The remainder 7,290 is the excess reserve. That is the maximum amount of loans Hatton National Bank can directly grant. So it will lend that money. Hatton National Bank will lend that money by creating deposits, right? So 7,290 worth of loans will be granted by HNB by creating deposits. Same process, right? Then what will happen next? The borrowers of these loans, 7,290, will engage in transactions by writing checks. And we assume those suppliers of goods deposit those checks in NTB, Nation Trust Bank, right? Then what will happen? Nation Trust Bank will get this, this is the Hatton National Bank situation. This 7,290 checks which is created, these deposits created will disappear now, right? It will not be there anymore, right? And it will go to Hatton NTB, Nation Trust Bank. So this is the balance sheet of NTB, deposit 7,290. And then through the check clearance again, Nation Trust Bank will acquire that reserve, 7,290 out of 8,100. So 8,100 minus 7,290, what is left with the Hatton National Bank is 810, which is the required reserve, 10% of 8,100. So you can see Hatton National Bank cannot any longer grant loans, but Nation Trust Bank can grant loans. So this process will continue. Until there is no more, there is no more excess reserve. Okay, you can see this available reserve or the actual reserve remain the same, but the excess reserves are decreasing. Initially 9,000, then 8,100, then 7,290. That excess reserve is the amount of loans a bank can directly grant, right? So then we can identify the total created deposits so far, right? You know, Sampath Bank created 9,000 worth of deposits, that is money. Then Ceylon Bank created 8,100. Hatton National Bank created 7,290. Altogether 24,390 loans and the deposits, money created by the banking system so far, and it will go further, right? It will go further. So what is the total created deposit so far? 24,390. Then we can identify the balance sheet of the banking system. These are the created deposits and the loans. So the balance sheet of the banking system should have expanded by this amount, right? And initial balance sheet of 10,000. Initial balance sheet was 10,000 right here, right? This is the initial situation at Sampak Bank when the customer deposited this money. So that 24,300 something will be added to this one. Then what will be the balance sheet there? Yes, that 10,000 plus this created deposit 24,390, 34,390. Loans will be 24,390. Of course, these loans were granted by creating deposits, right? And then the reserves will be within the banking system. Nothing happened to the reserves. They will be within the banking system, right? Because there is no cash drain, right? No customer presented a cash check and withdrew money, right? So there is no cash drain. The reserves will be within the banking system. So this process will continue. So that's what we are going to understand next. If SRR is 10%, what is the excess reserve in the banking system now? Same way, you have to calculate it in the same way, right? You have to calculate 10% of this one, 34,390, which is 3,439, and actual reserve is 10,000. So actual reserve minus required reserve is the excess reserve. 10,000 minus 3,439, right? That will be the excess reserve. So how do you calculate excess reserve? Actual reserves minus required reserve. Actual reserve is 10,000. Required reserve is, as I said, 3,439. Right? So what is the excess reserve then? Excess reserve value is 6,561. So this is now this is the banking system. There is excess reserve. There are excess reserves of 6,561. So this credit creation process will continue, right? And it will continue, and finally there will be a multiple times increasing the amount of credit granted by the banking system, which is explained with the deposit multiplier, right? Which is explained with the deposit multiplier. What does the deposit multiplier say? It says because of an excess reserve in a bank, in a banking system, you could see that now there will be a multiple times expansion in deposits, which is money, right? Which is explained with the deposit multiplier. So what is the limitation for deposit multiplier? Statutory reserve ratio. That is, because of statutory reserve ratio, every time a bank has to keep a required reserve. So the excess reserve will decline. Finally, it will come to zero. Then the banking system cannot grant any more loans. So the limitation for credit creation is the statutory reserve ratio. So you can say higher the SRR, lower the ability of banks to create loans, grant loans by creating deposits. So this is the limitation. So higher the SRR, lower the deposit multiplier. How do you express it mathematically? When one side is higher, the other side is lower. 1 over R. That is the way. So deposit multiplier equals 1 over R. When R is higher, D will be lower. Right? So how do you calculate just? Then this deposit multiplier into excess reserve is the maximum amount of loans the banking system can finally lend. So let's calculate the deposit multiplier first of all. 1 over 0.1 means 10. So deposit multiplier is 10. So this 10 into excess reserve at present. What is the excess reserve right there? Excess reserve is excess reserve is 6,561. Right? This into 10. Right? This is the this into 10 is the maximum amount of loans the banking system can finally lend. So how do you calculate maximum? That is known as maximum expansion in money supply as well. Maximum expansion in money supply. So excess reserves into deposit multiplier, which is 6,561 into 10, which is 65,610. Right? From that point onward, the banking system can create this much of credit this much of money, right? Okay, so let's identify the final picture now. This was the situation before that 65,610 of money creation, right? This was the situation. Excess reserve here is 6,510, that into the multiplier 65,510, okay. Then that should be added to this banking, that balance sheet of this banking system, okay. So after, what should be the situation? Let's check this out again. Yes, what is the value? 65,610. This is the maximum expansion in money supply from that point onward. And this is the excess reserve, that into multiply. Okay? Right. So, what is the final situation then? That 65,610 will be added to this value. When you add that, you can see it's going to be 100,000. Right? 100,000. And when you add that 65,610 to this loans value, the loans will be 90,000. Right? Okay? So, then you can see the reserves are actually 10,000. Nothing happened to that because there was no cash drain. Then 10% of 100,000 is 10,000. So now there is no more excess reserve in the banking system. Right? This actual reserve equals the required reserve. 10% of 100,000. So this is the maximum expansion in money supply. So now you can understand what this fractional reserve banking is, what this credit creation is. What is fractional reserve banking? It is a banking practice where a bank divides its actual reserves into two, as required reserve and excess reserve. And based on the excess reserve, loans are granted by creating deposits. By creating deposits. That is the fractional reserve banking. And it leads to credit creation. So what is credit creation? Due to fractional reserve banking, based on excess reserves of a bank or banks in the banking system, all the banks within the banking system will be able to create multiple amount of deposits. Will create multiple amount of deposits, and grant loans. That is called credit creation or money creation, right? Now, I hope you understood the lesson with this practical example, and there are two more areas we have to study further. That is cash drain. What if the reserves decrease within the banking system? That's one area. The other area is injection of more money to the banking system. So when we adjust two situations, you can answer any question in the paper, right? So I hope you benefited from this video. Please subscribe my YouTube channel and click the bell icon so that you receive more videos. You receive the notification of the videos I upload. Thank you very much.